Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fiume, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have a very special guest. I have the co-founder and CEO of We Sell Restaurants, Robin Gagnon, who's also a IFA board member. Robin, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for allowing me to visit with your audience today.
Thanks, Robin. I am looking forward to this. This is a very special episode, I think, because I get to chat with somebody who's not just a franchise expert, but a franchisor as well. And as somebody who's been involved in franchising for a long time and on the part of restaurant transfers of franchises and also as a franchisor. So this is going to be exciting.
It will be. We have quite a journey because we are kind of on both sides of transactions. We see those folks emerging in the space, that we see them when they need to transfer units out. And then we're taking those lessons and using them to the benefit of our own franchise to attract and retain the best possible talent for our brand.
Nice. All right. Well, here we go. Well, Robin, let's start out with, I understand you co-founded this business back in 2001. How did you get started?
So it was very interesting. My husband's background, he was with KPMG, Big Five accounting, doing business development. My background, I was with Fortune 100 company. I was actually the VP of strategic marketing for the Macy's South division, which was all of the stores. I lived in Atlanta. It was all the stores east of Texas, and then up to the DC area and down to Florida. And, we have always been entrepreneurial. And someone said, Atlanta needs a good restaurant broker. And so there we went, started out, developed the brand names. Of course, I'm still doing my marketing role, but I'm doing nights and weekends. I'm developing the website, doing the branding and all of those things. And after a couple of years, I said, you know what, let's just go all in, do it together. And so we developed this brand. And 2 decades later, here we are. We're coast to coast, 45 states, knocking on the door of 450 million in listings and over 1,000 listings. So, just keep growing by leaps and bounds, and very excited about it.
I love hearing how people started. It was sort of like you had this, one day there's this entrepreneurial seizure. Somebody told you we needed this in Atlanta. And then suddenly that's it. Like you and your husband are like, you're off to the races. Like, yep, that's it. Life's changing. We're going to start this business. Isn't that crazy how things happen?
It absolutely is. And of course, when we started, we thought, okay, well, Atlanta needs a good restaurant broker. And then what we learned is that people really deserve and need a specialist in this industry, like the guy who's selling a daycare center and a car lot and an industrial complex. That is not the person who understands and really has empathy for the restaurant seller. And so that specificity has been what served us so well. And it's interesting because when we started, people would say to us, why are you limiting yourself? And in retrospect, it was the best thing we could have ever done, because now we sort of own that digital space online. If someone says, how do I buy a restaurant? How do I sell a restaurant? Odds are we're going to come up.
It is brilliant. That is a brilliant idea. I think thinking back to most of us that when we start a business, we're so worried about failing that we think we have to appeal to everybody, right? So we think if by offering something to everyone, we're going to, throw it against the wall and see what sticks, and hopefully we'll get customers. But it's to your detriment. Like by having a niche market, that's how you ultimately succeed, is by focusing.
Absolutely. And having the discipline to just stay in that lane and never just try to, despite the years when people have said, well, what about this or what about this, just kind of staying very, very true to, we are going to service this vertical only and do it super, super well.
Wow. Okay. This is why I'm excited about this episode with you, because you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly in franchising. And since our audience, I think of it as we have emerging founders that are, they're in the grind right now, trying to, in franchising their business. There's people who are looking to franchise. And the other half of our audience are people who are looking to become a franchisee. And I understand you guys are really in the resale side of the business of transfers, but you've seen in franchising really good franchisors, not so good franchisors, and I would love to get that distinctive difference on, what have you seen as what has made specifically an emerging franchisor? What does it take for them to break through and become an established brand? Like, how do they get out of being stalled out?
So I think the first thing is they absolutely must be capitalized in such a way that they don't make bad decisions, because it begins with that person you let into your brand. And, honestly, for we sell restaurants, we end up being the cleanup on aisle 5 for all the mistakes, right? All the people that Fran Dev said, oh, they're going to be great. And then they never left their day job. They're going to be
Right.
great, but they didn't have enough capital to last past year 1. So we have really seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And my advice to emerging brands is, be so disciplined. I mean, I know that it's cool to be talking about responsible franchising now, but
Right.
because we had sort of that entree into what that world looks like when you're trying to get people out of your system, it's just so much smarter to never let them in the first place. So have enough money so that you're not dependent on selling that next franchise. Get yourself either enough capital or your brand in such a way that you can be, royalty self-sufficient and not need to sell a unit in order to be successful.
Where were you in 2003 when I needed you?
I was 2 years into this brand.
I started out, I immediately sold my company on location, all the cash flow gone, and I went all in. And thank goodness it was 2003. And as you know, selling franchises in 04, 05, 06 was not that difficult. And that's the only reason why I'm probably still here to this day, is that I did not start in 08, 09, and that I started when I did. But I made that common mistake that a lot of people make is I wanted to be all in, but I didn't think about I wasn't prepared with the cash flow that I was going to need, because I just assumed I've got this great idea. People are going to want to buy franchises. And I thought people were going to get up and running as quickly as I got up and running. And of course, then I interpreted that as, okay, I did the math and the royalties and thinking about, oh my gosh, money's just going to start flowing in. And I was almost bankrupt within 2 years. I couldn't have been any more wrong. I really was close.
Yeah, and that transparency, listen, this is why your audience tunes into this show. Just being that candor and transparency is so important in this industry. Listen, you literally have to know going in that you're all in personally, but you cannot count on your franchisees to be all in at that same level. They're not, that whole rinse and repeat. And I've seen franchisors start and they have a great idea and it works in a metropolitan area. And they're like, okay, we're off to the races. But they never tested it in suburbs, or they never tested it against a different demographic group. Now we have to be so much smarter, more effective, and more challenging of our own concepts in order to achieve those next units. And the folks that are just selling their way into success, they won't make it long term because too many of those units are going to turn over.
Yeah. And the restaurant business is not an easy business either.
It's absolutely not. There is so much competition and there's velocity. That's one reason why for a restaurant brokerage business brand like ours, it's an ideal candidate, because there is so much turnover. People get in and people get out. I tell people the greatest thing that ever happened to our business model was Bobby Flay and the Food Network. He made it look so sexy to be in the restaurant.
Right.
And so they want to get in, and then, they want to get out. And also it's a lifestyle change, right? Like I've been with buyers who will buy from me. They're young men and they're like, I want a bar and I'm going to have a sports bar and it's going to be great.
Exactly.
And then I see them get married and I see all the announcements. And then years later, they're like, okay, my wife wants me to do this. I need to clean the shop so I can be home at 3 every day. And so,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, they just transition.
Robin, it's almost like you can start a timer. As soon as a young guy buys a sports bar, you're like, and we're off. You know, it's that 5 to 7 year window before they're calling you going, no, I can't do this anymore.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know, with the similarity though, between the restaurant business and just my business and others is that sometimes people get caught up in the brand of what they think they're going to be doing every day. Like if they think they're running a sports bar, they think they're going to be watching football, watching golf during the day. It's like, that is nothing you are not going to be doing any of that.
You are so right. I cannot tell you the number of people that come to me and they're like, and now this pizza shop open and I'm going to make pizzas. What are you thinking? Yes. And a lot of people actually have a skill set that's super, super good in that entrepreneurial checklist startup phase. But then they get to that realization of, now what? And they really are having to, deal with the vendors and negotiate discounts and help with the payroll and make sure that the truck gets checked in with the inventory and all those things. And life comes at you fast.
Yeah.
And the restaurant business is tough. We tell people it's a penny business. You have these prime costs you have to manage. You have to manage food, you have to manage labor, and you can't get over your head on an occupancy cost with a landlord who definitely wants to take all your money before you even get to that, get started.
Right. You're picking up dimes in front of the steamroller, so to speak.
That's right.
Okay. Well, now that we know who's not right for a restaurant franchise, who is right for a restaurant business?
You know what? The ideal candidate to buy a restaurant business is the guy who's already done it. He's in your back of the house. He's in your front of the house. He's been running it and he knows the business. He loves the business and he's never been his own boss. And that whole idea of being your own boss is like, it just, we tell people we sell the American dream one restaurant at a time because it truly is. And I will never forget a brand I worked with a few years ago because we have a lot of relationships with a lot of franchisors and they, work with us on resales and say, here, help me find a new candidate. And I brought in a young man and he was like scraping pennies from his entire family. Like, how are we going to get all the money together to do this? Took a store that was underperforming, really not performing at all. It was underwater. Put it all together. We were, on a wing and a prayer with the landlord to try to get him approved. And the next year, he's franchisee of the year.
Wow.
Because he just, for him, it was his family business. And that's how you have to treat it, right? Your franchise, it's a franchise. And so, like, there's the guide rails, there's the menu, there's the trademark, but you still have to control your own village. You have to be out there talking to the Little League. You have to be present at the school board meetings. You have to be plugged into the school system. You have to be part of the community. And he was willing to do that. He had the greatest year-over-year sales increase in the system and was franchisee of the year. And those individuals who are doing it today, they're opening and closing the doors right now. If they can find the capital, they're ideal candidates, particularly for a resale. That's
interesting. So it's really because it is such a lifestyle business. That's why it's so important for them to actually have worked in the restaurant business so that they find that that's the kind of life that they want and they love. Mm-hmm. And then buying the franchise is more or less really a promotion, so to speak, than owning your own business. But it's critical that they have that foundation of knowing what to expect because the restaurant business it's hard.
It is. And I think back on some of the folks, their restaurants that I've sold. And I know a gentleman now, I sold his restaurant 10 years ago. He was a numbers guy and he's a chief financial officer now. We're still connected on LinkedIn and we chat but he decided he was going to get into the sandwich shop business. And, his P&Ls were fabulous in terms of how they were executed, but they were terrible in terms of how he was managing the actual business, right? And so you just got to know what your strengths are and then lean into that. And, don't get excited about a concept. Don't fall in love with the food. If you love the food, back somebody up in the business or go, buy gift cards and give them to your whole family and go eat out there. You don't have to buy the franchise to support it, right?
Right. Go eat there. You don't have to buy yourself a job because you like their food.
Exactly.
That's not a good reason to own a business.
No.
No, not at all. Okay, so what about somebody who is, you shared somebody who was strictly a numbers person. What do you find in terms of kind of the split between people who are strictly financial people that are buying this, they're buying a restaurant from you because of the economics versus buying it because it's a lifestyle of them being their own boss? How would you say that split?
Say it's probably about 50-50, but we're really also talking about two different business models being offered because
Mm-hmm.
on the one hand, we might be offering a turnaround opportunity. It literally you're buying the assets of the business, the brand name, access to the training, the lease, but it's underwater today and it needs a turnaround specialist. And that person needs to be someone who has that deep bench experience in the industry. But we're also very profitable businesses where there's already leadership in place. They're not going to have to be hands-on. As long as that person is still engaged in the business, they can easily acquire, and that's where they'll do roll-ups of multiple units, 4 and 5 and 6 units. And I've helped some people in the industry acquire 10 or 11 stores.
Mm.
And then that becomes kind of a portfolio balancing act, right? So then they'll get their 10 or 11 new ones, put them into a portfolio with 25, and then they're like, okay, want to chop the bottom performing. Robin, sell this one. And when you
Right.
carve that out, it makes sense to that second guy, right? The guy with experience, because it'll be more profitable without all that layered in expense, G&A expense. And then I find this guy something more profitable, and that just raises the value of his entire portfolio.
Okay, so we have the transfers for the franchise owner that is getting out because maybe things weren't going well. What about this? We're hearing all about the greatest transfer of generational wealth that we're now underway. Are you starting to
The
see more and more people
silver,
retiring now? What's going on?
yeah, the silver tsunami, right?
Yeah, is it here yet?
It's here. It's here, and it's been here for a few years because for baby boomers, there are 10,000 baby boomers every single day turning 65 from now until 2030. So you think about that, and those baby boomers have this massive amount of wealth. And what we see, there's so much going on with these generations. It's so interesting. The baby boomers gave birth to the millennials, right? And the
Right,
millennials are amazing. They're the most highly educated cohort in our society ever. But that means they don't want mom and dad's store.
right. They don't
Right.
want.
They have no interest. So it's not going to transfer to them. Now, on the younger side of those baby boomers, then they may have some Gen Z or Gen Y folks out there. They also don't want the store because that old legacy, fill in the blank, fast casual business that's, burning peanut oil and delivering lots of money to the back line.
Right.
They want the new cool concept that's planting a tree in Africa every time they sell a smoothie, right? So they don't want the business. And so mom and dad are host. They have to come to us and we have to find a new person for them because they're not transferring to family members the way they might have even a generation ago.
Right. All right. So are us Gen Xers buying these franchises that maybe you're saying I want a new chapter in my life to still own a business? Is
Oh,
that who's still buying?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, COVID displaced so many people. There were so many people and this disruption's continuing, right? It's still not done because now, okay, we went through 2020, took people out of their normal roles. Some of them needed to buy, or retirees stayed, that people who should have retired and would have been selling their businesses back then held on to them, right? So they
Hmm.
didn't transfer. So now, fast forward 3 or 4 years later, we finally have some businesses, a large collection of businesses, and it sounds like maybe even the government going forward saying work from home is over, come back to the office. And
Yeah.
when it happens, we're going to have more of these Gen Xers drop out and say, okay, what's my new life? And my new life is going to be buying a business.
It's certainly an exciting time to be in your business.
It is. It's been exciting from day one. When you are an entrepreneur, like for me, I can't imagine, but people say, well, have you thought of retirement? This is like, if you love business and if you love being a franchisor and you love seeing people go into business for themselves, like this is a great thing you can do forever.
Yeah, for sure. Tell us about your experience with the IFA. So I understand you're on the IFA board now. You've been on the board previously. What's that all like?
So for 8 years, I served on the Women's Franchise Committee and ultimately became the chair of the Women's Franchise Committee. When I gave up that responsibility, that was my first year on the IFA board. And then I was permitted to move on into a permanent seat. And then also asked simultaneously to come on as the vice chair of the Franchisor Forum. And the Franchisor Forum is wonderful. It's really not talked about a lot, but it's this element. We have the franchisee forum, the franchisor forum, then the supplier forum, which are really the three legs of the stool for franchising. And so the franchisor forum almost serves as this ad hoc advisory board to the board of directors to say, these are things that are on the franchisor's minds. These are the things we should be talking about. And so in February, I'll become the chair of the franchisor forum of the IFA. But,
Congrats.
Well, thank you. But the time and energy and passion I have given to the IFA, it has given back to me tenfold, right? Just the people that you meet and the connections. And I encourage anyone in this industry, like the first thing we did the first year, our FDD was hot off the press. We picked it up from our attorney at our first IFA meeting in 2012. And I mean, the role of the IFA is to promote, protect, and enhance franchise. And they truly do that in the advocacy that's been shown by that organization over even the past 5 years.
Yeah.
You have to join and you need to get involved to support the industry.
I couldn't imagine being a franchisor and not being a member of the IFA. And it's unnecessary to go at it alone.
Right.
It's inexpensive. The value you get and the connections you make, you couldn't pay for that. There's not enough money in the world that you could do that on your own.
And this is specifically for your listeners that are emerging brands, because I can remember when we first came into the IFA and our franchise consultant, because, we all have consultants, and our franchise consultant said, this is the most generous industry you'll ever enter. And I said, tell me what you mean by that. She was like, this is not like corporate America, Robin. Like, you're not vying with someone to take their space. You can sit down with anyone, if you have 0 units and they have 2,000, you're at the same table and they're willing to share and provide information and counsel and mentor. And that is so true. That has absolutely been my experience in all these years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, likewise. I've experienced that myself. One thing I've got to share with you is that I've been doing this podcast now since September of 2023. We've done roughly 140 plus episodes. Robin, at least 50% of my guests have been female. How exciting is women in franchising is on the rise. And it was not like that when I started in 2003. And these ladies are superstars. I've interviewed so many that they blow me away. And I love that they've connected with each other and growing their network, and just super impressive.
I totally agree with you on that. I was just at the Emerging Franchise Conference. So I was on the conference committee. And someone else did a post about it, because if you looked out amidst the entire room, 400 attendees, easily 60% were female. And I did one-on-one meetings with these franchisors. And I was like, my gosh, you guys are so much smarter than what I was. I didn't know, they're brilliant ideas.
Yes.
And just leaning into getting the education and the experience and the mentorship that they need early. But yes, and I can remember I have a letter from one of the first chairs of the Women's Franchise Committee, and I think when they started it was 1996, and there were 6 of them in a room, and the stories they will tell, and I have a letter from that chair to the chair of the IFA at that time saying, you need a woman on every committee. And there was pushback about that. And now I look around and women are leading all of these committees and have such an important role.
I kind of felt when I started in 03, I agree with you 100% that there was absolute generosity. I felt that connection. But I also coming in 2003 and not knowing anybody and going to my first IFA, I did get a sense of this good old boy network. And it was almost like I felt in 03, there was a changing of the guard. I felt that there was this like new wave of young franchisors that were starting in the 2000s. And there were these, older folks that had been in franchising for 30 years, and they were kind of on their way out. It was definitely, the shift was underway.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, I mean, we have these brands exploding from anywhere and everywhere. I mean, who knew what Unleashed Brands was 10 years
Right.
ago, right? And it's a what, $2 billion brand now? It's insane. They're
Yeah.
just smart people rolling up things, platforming brands, using technology in new and useful ways. So yeah, it's an exciting time to be in franchising.
Well, great segue. I'd love to get your take on your thoughts on the influence on private equity, on how you think that's going to, kind of play out over the next 5 to 10 years. How do you see the shift, and what's going to be the impact, you thinking?
So I think any time in America, in corporate history, anything you do, we always go too far one direction, too far the other, right? So I think that the industry saw this huge influx of equity, and for a time, it really threw things off out of balance in the wrong direction. And I think the pendulum is swinging back. And I'd say that the next 5 years will be better in terms of having synchronized relationship between equity and the franchisor. I think that the franchisor will not give up so much of their equity at the outset to retain what's truly important, right, to the franchisee and to the community at large, which is that founder's imprint on the brand. And so I think that founders will give up less control, still take in money. And I think that private equity will understand that they will have a synchronized relationship when they allow the founders to keep doing the things that they're doing, but then just give them the cash to exceed where they were previously.
Yeah, I think you put that so well about the pendulum going from one side too far and then to the other. I've seen that. I feel like over the last few years, it's been from an emerging franchisor perspective. Some of these people are seeing it as a gold rush. Like, I can create this brand and not even go far with it, and somebody's ready to scoop me up, tuck me under their wing, and they're going to save me, and they're going to pay me for not doing much of anything anymore.
Right. And it's shocking when I see like 6 units, somebody has 6 units and they sell. Are you kidding me? Six units? You're doing it.
I have no idea what you're doing.
Your franchisees are running the show. You're not even running the show.
Exactly.
I mean, you're still learning so much, so
yeah,
it's going to be interesting, but I think we're going to get into a better place.
I think so. I'm a huge fan of Alicia Miller, who wrote Big Money in Franchising. I adore her. She's so smart, and I love her book. And she has this quote in her book that I guess Matt Haller had said something about. It's time that we get the private equity firms out of the lobby and out of the hallways and into the meetings, because they've always been kind of on the peripherals, kind of hanging around, but never really in. And it's time that they really have a really strong understanding of what's going on in franchising, be part of the community and not be circling, in the lobby.
Yes, that's a great point. Matt is a phenomenal leader, as you know.
Yes.
So insightful and able to really handle all the pieces and parts. Like, sometimes you see leaders that are great on the political spectrum, great on the operational spectrum, great on the financial spectrum. Matt is one of those true talents that has it in all directions and knows how to bring people together to support his initiatives.
Absolutely. What do you see now as the big challenge now that you're back on the IFA board here? What do you see as on deck here now as our biggest issues?
Well, thankfully, now that we've had a change of course in terms of the legislature, thankfully, the IFA has been teeing up relationships and really feeding those relationships for a period of time. But I think everyone's issue for the next year, the biggest issue is, things that are sitting out there, finally getting a handle on the PRO Act and having autonomy and not having franchisors be liable for employees. So there was a number of pieces of legislation out there that need to be pushed forward. I'm just afraid with the Senate and the House in the hands of the Republicans, talk about a gold rush. Everybody has their hand out. They're all rushing. And so I am just thankful that Matt and his legislative team have developed those relationships up front so that we can get our initiatives at the front end of what's going to be, I think, a very busy legislative season.
I think you're right. Is the joint employer issue going to be at least put to rest for a little while?
It's our hope that now, finally there'll be a legislative solution to the Joint Employer Act, and it will, then it can be gone. It's not going to be with the strike of a pen from an executive commander in chief that they're going to be able to, give that authority back to a regulatory board.
Right.
It's legislatively going to be dealt with 100%. And that's
right. Yeah, I kind of feel like thinking back over the years, it depended on the administration on whether it was top of mind again. It was like, all right, in 2008, it was huge. Then it went away, and then it was back again.
Then we were okay because Trump was in, and then we were back on the ropes because Biden was in. And
Right.
That's not a way for us to run our business model. We need some certainty. And I think that's a chord that resonates with legislatures. Like, certainty allows people to invest over a period of time, and we're investing capital and we're building out these brands. And by the way, we're employing lots and lots of people. So let's have a conversation about how we settle this once and for all.
Sounds good. All right, Robin, let's talk about your company as a franchisor. I had missed that at first. I didn't realize it. My apologies. So I understand you have 57 franchises open, but your model is totally different, even though you're in 45 states. So what brought you to franchising your business? Because you could have easily just said, hey, I'm going to just do these transfers, resales on my own, build my own organization. You didn't need to franchise your company.
That's actually a very astute observation, right? Because not many people actually catch that, because we could just do this. What we're looking for is market share growth, market share penetration. And while we will definitely attract people to do business with us, if I put a franchisee in that market, instead of having 10 listings in a market, we can push that into 35 or 40 and really start to command the marketplace. So for us, we will always be one of these very unusual franchise brands that will not have to franchise everywhere in order to the entire nation. But where we do have franchisees, there's definitive growth beyond just, what we would attract on our own as a corporate model.
Sure. So who is the ideal candidate to be a franchisee of We Sell Restaurants?
That's a great question. Our ideal candidate is someone who's been in the business, right? We call this the restaurant business with banker's hours. Right?
That's a win-win.
Right. He knows the pain. He knows the numbers. He knows the operations. And, he can show such empathy for this seller who's saying, this is why I need to exit, and create a structure to make that happen, backed by all of our marketing and the years of experience that we have. But yet he doesn't want to be the guy who's got to meet the truck on Tuesday morning because, the sous chef called out or whatever, right? So yeah, the restaurant business with banker's hours. So that about 50 to 60% of our franchisees are prior restaurant owners that makes this.
Makes sense. Plus, I would imagine for your franchisees to be in the community, in their territory, there's just something to be said about having that face-to-face with the other restaurateur and talking about the transfer. It's different than just working somebody over a phone in, office to do a resale. I would imagine that is a huge part of it, because restaurants are based on relationships in the community, and their tie to the community is so important.
So we wrote a book in 2012 called Appetite for Acquisition. And one of the things that I talked about in that book is the fact that, restaurants they're the front stoop, right? Because that's gone now. It's the last place where humans connect with humans, and you're breaking bread and having wine, and there's real conversations happening. And that's like just the last bastion of civilization left where that type of person-to-person communication is happening, particularly in this electronic world. So yes, you're absolutely right. This is a people business. It is a personal relationship business. It is about, you think about a restaurant. When for my family, I'm happen to be in North Carolina visiting them right now. The same restaurant where my niece celebrated a birthday, and then from there, went on date night with her husband. Ultimately, that's where he asked her to marry him, where we all went for the engagement party. And then, the restaurants are a part of our soul. They are a part of our community. And that's why they're never going away. They will just keep changing hands. And we are so humble and so fortunate and blessed to be a part of that industry to help that happen.
Wow, that's fantastic. And your franchisees are able to take advantage now of this silver tsunami in their area, which is another great reason why you franchised, because there's only so many that you can handle, but for them to be in their community and having so much new opportunity coming about.
Absolutely. It's
Huge.
ideal for them. And, we are looking at the macro level, right? What are the trends? Well, and we are dealing with franchisors who say we want a relationship with We Sell Restaurants to help us deal with franchise resales, because it's an issue for every brand, right? That
Yeah, of course.
journey is hitting every single franchise that's out there, and they need a reliable resource for those transactions. So they're looking for a partner. So they come to us at the national level, and then our franchisees benefit at the local level. And they're also doing not just franchises, but independents and all those transactions, and helping that community keep those restaurants open. We are sustainability, right?
Right, right.
Restaurants last forever.
I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but as a franchisor, one of my biggest challenges when somebody wanted to get out, of course, was the transfer process and who was going to handle that. And my franchise development team, of course, they would help in the resale process, but it's a whole lot different than going to an organization like yours, and obviously specifically in the restaurant business, but that's all you do, versus a franchisor's Fran Dev team handling it. We can't even scratch the surface of trying to have a reach out on a concerted effort to try to get somebody sold.
Absolutely. It's a different client, right? My client for a resale is much more risk averse than the client that's hitting the Fran Dev door to begin with, right? That person,
Right.
they want to put their stamp on it. They want to build it from the ground up. So they're not even advertising to the right client. Then you have the issue of how much is it worth. Your legal team definitely doesn't want you in the middle of that. If you're a Fran Dev department,
True.
you want to be telling the guy going out, your business is worth this, or the girl coming in, hey, you should only pay that. You want a third party, independent third party, to have those conversations. And then, it's sticky business, right? Because we're dealing with the buyer, the seller, the buyer's attorney, the seller's attorney, the landlord's attorney, the franchisor's legal attorney, and operations to get them all trained. So
Right.
the specialization that we have, that's just business as usual for us. Fran Deb is like screaming, running for the door, saying,
Yeah.
I have a checklist. They go get a lease. Like, this is totally different stuff. And that's why we're so good at it, because we know it inside out.
And it slows down a Fran Dev team internally to do a resale. It is painful.
It absolutely is. You just have to think about, with every resources are scarce. That Fran Dev team needs to focus on what they're best at, because one resale will eat up the capacity of, working with 5 or 6 new candidates. And by the way, when we bring resale candidates in, it's not unheard of for them to go ahead and make a commitment to buy another unit or to look at a Fran Dev development for the future. But the candidate we're working with is not the guy that's going to strike that check with nothing. They want numbers on the books they can see. So we put those together, recast them for them.
Well, I didn't think about that. It really opens up the franchisor to new opportunities for people who otherwise would never have come into their system.
That's right.
By buying additional units. Yeah. What is the investment range of your franchise?
So you can, interestingly enough, the franchise fee itself is $50,000. And our item 7, we're just over $100,000. That's operating capital. I mean, think about it. You don't need an office. You need a cell phone. You need a good internet connection. You need a car, and you need a good pair of shoes, because they're going to put you to work in the street. But it's not we're a very low investment brand, and our franchisee satisfaction has been at the top of Franchise Business Review for the last, we've only been in 3 surveys, and in all 3 surveys, we were in the top 20%.
Congratulations.
Franchisee survey. So our franchisees are happy. They're making money. Our item 19 is disclosed on our FDD. Our average franchisee in last year's FDD earned $276,200. in a 12-month period in transactions. So it's a great business model.
Yeah, real nice. What about territory size? How are your territories divvied up?
We look at it based on population, which roughly equates to how many restaurants there are. We're looking at restaurants, but there's no really good database for restaurants. So
really,
we look at population. So someplace like Tampa might have 3 franchisees. Inner city of Denver will have 1, but then there's all the area around Denver. Atlanta, we have like 5 franchisees in that market.
Great. Robin, this was incredible. I've enjoyed talking with you. If someone was interested in opening up a franchise of a We Sell Restaurants, or just wants to get in touch with you and talk with you on your franchise experience and bend your ear a little bit, how can we get a hold of you?
I would love that. Just reach out to me. Go to my website, WeSellRestaurants.com. That's WESELL, restaurants with an S.com. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm out there pretty much every day, seeing who else is out there and connecting and having conversations. Email us, info@WeSellRestaurants.com, or text or call our home office, 404-800-6700.
Awesome. Robin, I got one last question for you. So at the end of every podcast, I do a thing called the franchise tip jar, because like you said, the franchise community is so generous with sharing. Now I'm going to do something a little different for 2025. I'm going to turn this more towards franchisees. So if you had a friend that was thinking of becoming a franchisee of a brand, what would be a piece of advice that you would give him or her before they actually go stroking that check and investing in a concept?
I would tell them to sit down with the people that love them the most and are willing to be honest with them and have a conversation about whether or not they will be all in. And if they cannot answer, I will be all in for this restaurant franchise, for this restaurant brokerage franchise, for this lash franchise, whatever it is. If you're not committed to be all in, if you think I'm going to keep a little bit of my day job or this or that, don't do it, right? Because the franchisor you owe the franchisor the full-time commitment, and the franchisor needs that to expand in their markets.
That is great. Just a great lesson. Thank you so much, Robin. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for being on the show.
I loved it.
Pleasure to finally meet you.
I know. We'll have to connect at IFA in February.
I will see you at the IFA. We will be there.
All right.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.